Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and the Crying Sky Raid remains the absolute hardest content that Wiz has ever put out. There's a lot that goes into a successful run, and I'll be going over all of that in this video. The gear that drops, especially the ones for both PvE and PvP, is pretty insane, like required if you want to do PvE. And if you're thinking about doing PvP, keep watching, because this video is going to be pretty important, guys. You need the Hunhao robe and Shibaba boots with either the Hunhao or Shibaba wand, depending on your school. The Hunhao amulets are also a nice touch because of the 2 extra resist, and so are the decks, so definitely stay tuned if you're after those pieces. To start off, the raid strategy that I'll be going over in this video was made by Ant Lives Matter of the Dauntless Ducks Guild. All credit for the strat goes to him. I made personalized slides for every role, but he was the author of the main guide, and it's his strat that I think is the most accessible and easiest to set up for. I've put optimal gear setups on my role-specific slideshows, which I've also linked in the description, but knowing the main guide is also important in this raid as it goes over crucial information when it comes to this incredibly complex raid where even one slip up can end a run. Anyway, just for some general knowledge, there are 4 quadrants in this raid. They are the north, west, east, and south areas of the map. You can find them by looking at your minimap. Up means north, down means south, etc. This screenshot from the main guide pretty much covers the most important parts of the raid that aren't the fights. You especially want to avoid the storm, which will continue in a certain quadrant for 3 minutes at a time, damaging you for 500 health and removing 20 mana for every tick. It also nukes your frame rate, so avoid it for that as well. You also really want to avoid Wisps of Misfortune. Those of you who did the Dragon Spy raid remember that they would just, slow you down, which you can easily solve with pet mode, but these Wisps can do either that or have your mana, which sucks because if it happens more than once, you need to find mana somewhere in the raid, or they can even send you to jail, which is located in the southwest corner of the map and requires not only the person in jail to use 5 energy on a magic touch, but 2 people have to drop everything to come magic touch the 2 lamps outside. And since everyone's got to be doing something at all times in this raid, that can really tank your time, which I should mention is very limited as you only have 25 minutes to beat at least one of the 4 priest or priestess bosses before the raid's just over. Bottom line, don't go to jail. Avoid those wisps like the plague. Sometimes they'll just, spawn on you, which is tough, but as long as you make sure you do everything in your power to not hit them otherwise, that's good. You can actually get your team to despawn them temporarily by managing Misfortune in the west. This requires 10 Misfortunes tiers to be placed into the collector in the west, but once they're disabled, they don't come back for another 6 minutes. Mana Wisps will spawn instead, which is extremely helpful, especially to your teammates that have either gotten caught in the storm or hit a Wisp and got their mana, cut in half. Another extremely important part of this raid is cantrips. It's recommended that every role has level 7, but you can get away with the following on certain roles, assuming your guild's can use by min-max roster template. Level 1 on the Fire's Jade and Support Puller, level 3 on Storm 1, and level 5 on Myth 1, Myth 2, Storm 2, and the Storm's Jade. But get level 7 if you can. This raid also uses Rochambeau rules, meaning the schools of the mob or boss you're against have certain counters. And I'd be here all day if I explained them, so here is a screenshot from the main guide with all of the counters. A notable exception to this chart is the Codal mob, which will delete any and all gambits that you try to set up, no matter what kind it is. You're typically not fighting any Codals, but they do roam around the map, they can spawn when a boss spawns or after it dies, that type of thing, and they can enter any ongoing fights, so be sure they are under control. That can chalk a run if a Codal enters a fight. Another important thing to mention is that there are certain roles that need certain pet talents. With this strat, Fire 2, who kills High Priest Yatasha in the North fight, will need Bernie's Omen on their pet, so they can will cast a Meltdown into their hand to counter any shields Hunhao may use. Storm 3 and Myth 2 will need Torrance's Rage on their pets in order to will cast a Storm Scion into their hand during the Hunhao fight as well. The Kameka polymorph, being Myth 2, can top deck a Scion. It is in the polymorph's deck, but it's best not to tempt fate with RNG on that. The Ishta polymorph, being Storm 3, will definitely 100% need the pet talent though. Alright, so you're probably hearing me say Ishta polymorph, Kameka polymorph, and wondering what I'm on about. Well, there are 4 main priest and priestess bosses with their own puzzles. Ishta in the east, Yatasha in the north, Kameka in the south, and Outlock in the west. Failing any of the puzzles will spawn a Sky Serpent with 500 health, as well as resetting the puzzle entirely. Typically, this is a run ender, especially for the north, and I'll go over the priest and priestess puzzles and how to complete them. Every run that you do with this strat will start with the Dance of Ishta in the east. Basically, there are 14 drum spots, including the initial drum that starts them all off. My guild uses this drum map, and we send 8 players to their drum spot, while a 9th gets the firefish next to drum 6. Effectively, once the big drum in the middle is pressed, a random drum will pop up somewhere in these 8 spots, and the person assigned to that drum spot will need to walk on top of it. This will repeat 8 times, and after the 8th drum is pressed, High Priest Ishta will spawn at the east base of the pyramid. With this strat, the Storm's Jade and Storms 1 through 3 will fight him after a little while. The north puzzle that spawns High Priest Yatasha consists of 3 tokens. One of them is similar to what you've seen in the Dragonspire raid, where you have to go into pet mode and look around the north quadrant of the map to find it. There's a number of spots that it can be in, but it's not terribly hard to find, honestly. It shouldn't take that long. The other 2 tokens come from minion fights on the left and right sides of the back area. The wildlife token comes from the fight on the right side, and the astral token comes from the fight on the left side. Once all 3 are entered into the prayer wheels, you can beat the drum to spawn Yatasha. The south puzzle that spawns High Priestess Kameka also consists of 3 tokens, but unlike the north puzzle, you have to use the Reveal Invisible cantrip at these 9 locations in the southern quadrant of the map. There's no fighting involved, but this can be tricky, as there's something like 40 total token locations, and the tokens you need will only spawn at 3 of them. Once your team has found them all, you can set the prayer wheels at the south base of the pyramid and have the Myth's Jade, and this is real important, it's gotta be the Jade here, use one last reveal cantrip to reveal the drum, which they'll then beat to spawn Kameka. The last puzzle is in the west, and there's 3 parts to this one. To spawn High Priestess Outlock, your team will need to find 10 cacao pods scattered throughout the west and deposit them in the pod collector at the west base of the pyramid. Also at the west base is a fish head collector. Your team will need to deposit fire, ice, storm, myth, and death fish in it to finish up. Your team will be gathering 3 of all the above fish anyway, since the other 2 will be used at west and south fish and wisps to replenish your team's health and mana after a fight. The last part is 2 crystal skulls that come from 2 different fights in the west. Once everything is in, but usually Storm 4 will deposit the last crystal skull to finish it, Outlock will spawn and you can begin the fight. This is by far the most tedious of the 4 puzzles, and you'll be spending most of your time in the west collecting pods, doing skull fights, etc. to be able to get it done. As for pathing, our strat has us do Ishta's puzzle in the east straight off the bat, since it's much harder to get everyone to drop what they're doing elsewhere on the map and come back later into the raid. If Hoon House sends the storm to the east off rip, it'll be a shift home just to save time, because again, getting people back to the east is not as easy as it sounds. You could go north, west, and south in theory and start on those puzzles during the first rotation, but again, it's more trouble than it's worth to bring people back to east if they're already doing something elsewhere on the map. Assuming the storm is not east first, the myth team is an exception here. They'll go north to do their token fight on the right side instead. They're the last 3 that I didn't mention earlier, since there are 8 drum spots plus 1 person fishing at the beginning. If the storm goes north, they'll just start on either south or west before going back to north on the second storm rotation. Once that's done, the different roles go do their own things. The fire team will go do their skull fight in the west, the myths will go south to start revealing, the support puller and storm 4 will go do their token fight in the north, and everyone else is handling fish or pods in the west. Your individual role's path will be laid out for you on your role-specific slides, so I recommend using those in tandem with the main guide to help you figure out anything I didn't put on them. After the support puller and Storm 4 finish their token fight in the north, they have their skull fight out west to go to, but while they do that, the fights with High Priests Yatasha and Ishta should start. There are a number of strats that all 4 bosses use depending on the minion, and have your guide up at all times in the fights, because like I said earlier, one slip up can end the run, so have your eyes glued to your guide for the fights. This is often what ends runs. Someone will, play the wrong person, or someone will trap when it's a fire or life mob, or someone will use the wrong buff, just for some examples, so be sure to do exactly what the guide says. There's a couple scenarios where you may have to adapt, but you'll need to think fast if that happens. Like the Greenhorn minion at Yatasha tower shielding itself may require another turn for the Fire's Jade to shatter while everyone else passes, for example. Now it's time for the most important part of the video and the raid as well, Stupefy. This is a sigil support card that disables defensive enemy reactions, or their counter cheats really, for 1 turn with 1 copy in the west and 1 copy in the east. If you're the first person to walk by either one, type in chat west/east stupefy, primary school, secondary school, or alternatively, East Stoop bad, since East Stupefy can be a blade and trap counter at the same time. Usually, if either Stupefy does not counter traps, your Myth's Jade and Myth 2 will go do Stupefy. The strat for that is on your personalized slides, as well as the main guide on slide 29, and you'll need to wait for their call when the Cyclops is in the tree. They will say Jade's run in, and your Storm's Jade and Fire's Jade will engage Ishta and Yatasha respectively. If it's Ishta strat 1, you won't need Stupefy and can start him earlier, but Yatasha will always need it since he counters blades and traps without Stupefy. The goal here is to get Stupefy on the first turn so that the Fires at Yatasha can trap and the Storms at Ishta can blade if necessary. After Ishta and Yatasha are finished and the killers of their respective bosses polymorph to get an extra 10 minutes in total, because it's 5 per polymorph, it's basically a rinse and repeat for Outlock and Kameka. Make sure their puzzles are finished before Ishta and Yatasha are done for time efficiency. Get Fish and Wisps at west for the Outlock team and at south for the Kameka team, but be quick about it in the south, since the Wisps tend to phase through the wall for some reason. I would recommend somebody, like whoever's supposed to be holding the Stormfish, to not deposit it until the Myth team is ready to start at Kameka because of that. You know, like you don't want the health wisp to go through the wall and all that. The Priestesses' respective teams will finish up those fights, and after the polymorphs are ready, they can all stand on the 4 big drums at the top of the pyramid to spawn Hun Hao. Be assured people without Hun Hao cantrips are pulling at north and south, because Dauntless Ducks were actually on track to be the world's first team to beat Hun Hao, but a Kodal walked into the fight at the last second and they lost animation time. And, you know, I've already told y'all about Kodals. You don't want them walking into anything. If your pullers die in their fights, you'll need to have backups ready, and you'll need to get them out of jail after Hun Hao dies so they can craft the gear. The Hun Hao fight is definitely the most intense and requires the most cantrips, while we in Dauntless Ducks take pride in that our strat doesn't use like a crazy amount of cantrips. This one can't really be avoided. Hun Hao has a cheat where if he has at least one of every hanging effect, or if he has a gambit set up for the school that he, I guess, calls out like the nullity did. I don't know, the wiki's got all the voice lines. But basically, if he meets either of those conditions, he'll use a Meteor Strike at the end of the turn that has 100% of your team's max health, ending the run. So, in the pursuit of not letting the fight get to that point, your Dino Polymorphs dedicate the first turn, as well as the second, if Hun Hao goes first on round 1, to using 0-pip counters and elemental traps if they pull them. This ensures that Hun Hao will not use his Meteor cheat, and that your Dino team can kill him by turn 3. On the hitting round, the Yatasha Polymorph will use Meltdown to clear any shields. This will cast it into your hand by, the Bernie's Omen pet talent. And the Ishta and Kameka Polymorphs will send their Storm Scions from their Torrance's Rage pet talent to deal the killing blows. To ensure the Scions do enough damage, after Outlock pulls Hun Hao before they join, Yatasha will use a Restoring Rain 3 cantrip before joining the fight, second, and Ishta and Kameka will use Restoring Rain 1s to cover it. If the Dino team is first, the Storm's Jade will send a Donate Power 2 cantrip to ensure that the Ishta and Kameka Polymorphs have the pips they need to send their Scions. If Hun Hao is first, then no DP2 is necessary. Outlock and Yatasha should both hold on to at least one big hit, like Kelvin's Icy Gaze or Everwinter Oni, in the event the 2 Storm Signs don't kill Hun Hao. This rarely happens though. Before the hitting round, the people designated to send dual strikes 1, 2, and 3 will send them in for an extra 3 buffs to both Scions. It's real important that you don't send this in before the hitting round, because Hun Hao can empower and it'll take off all 3 of those dual strikes, or at least one of the 3 dual strike traps, which means the second Scion won't kill. So be sure you do that only on the hitting round. You'll only ever need backup hits if there are less than 2 elemental traps on when it's time for Ishta and Kameka to hit, and then if that happens, someone needs to send in a Restoring Rain 1 cantrip to get an extra 15 blade to both Scions. That should do it. If it doesn't, again, keep it hidden regardless if you're Outlock or Yatasha. since, you know, he's lived on 500 before, and I've clutched up with the Hydra or something when I'm playing the Outlook Polymorph. What a mouthful. This is a 9-page script. At this point, you've done it. Hun Hao is defeated, and you can now craft the gear and, you know, get your teammates out of jail, if applicable, of course. If you're doing this strictly for PvE, disregard everything except for the Xibalba wands. These are Eon/Reaver equivalent, depending on level, but they give Shad rating instead of pip conversion. If you're looking to do PvP, it can depend on school, so here's my recommendations for everyone. For fires, get the Hun Hao robe, amulet, and deck with Xibalba boots and wand. For ices, get the Hun Hao robe, wand, and amulet with Xibalba boots. For storm, get the Hun Hao robe, amulet, and deck with Xibalba boots, wand, and thame. For myth, get the Hun Hao robe, amulet, and deck with Xibalba boots and wand. Or, alternatively, get the Hun Hao wand and Dreamstalker deck for pip conversion setup. For life, get the Hun Hao wand and amulet with the Xibalba hat and a thame. For death, get the Hun Hao robe, amulet, and deck with Xibalba boots and wand. And then for balance, get the Hun Hao robe, wand, amulet, and ring with Xibalba boots. You need the pip chance from the ring, I promise. You will also need special reagents called Xibalba shards to upgrade these to their 170 versions, and every run will drop you at least 7. It'll be 7 or 8, so it might be a few runs if you don't plan on hitting the chest that is upcharged like insanely. It's like 835 crowns to hit it once, so the chest, honestly, I don't feel like is worth. But if you want to, you know, just dump a bunch of crowns so that you don't have to raid again, full send it. I mean, if you're like Bill Gates' son or whatever. And that'll about wrap up. I would say enjoy raiding, but from my experience doing this raid, it's extremely soul draining. So I think I'll just leave it at a good luck to y'all. All the useful stuff like the guide and roster template is down in the description. So how about it? Thank y'all for watching. I have been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.
And the problem is, DJ Khaled owes nobody no money. First of all, I have so much jewelry. I got more jewelry, and it's not even about the jewelry, because, you know,
jewelry. What is jewelry?
You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day,